All right, everybody, I'm still working on this. Here in Ashley's room, we have behind us a picture of she and her friends. There's lots of pictures of those around. Her favorite animal, her elephants, painted and drawn by one of her friends. A beautiful picture of some flowers that my father-in-law Fred did. And a book behind me called How to Wash a Woolly Mammoth and Toby and the Ice Giants, which we will be reading more about over the next couple of weeks when I share videos with you from here. And mostly it will be to read you stories, because you know that is one of my favorite parts of being your teacher. And I want to be able to share our next Jack and Annie adventure with you. And here with me is my good friend Guinness. Let's see if I can find him for you. There he is, chewing on his hoof. He is going to be snoring and grunting and doing all the fun things that he likes to do when he's with me. So he likes that we're doing school from home right now, but I am missing you like crazy. So here is the first book that I'm going to read to you, that I'm going to share with you, and it's called Wild and Woolly Mammoths by Aliki. And if you remember when we learned about dinosaurs to get us ready for Dinosaurs After Dark, our first Jack and Annie adventure, we heard a couple of stories from Aliki. This one is about the woolly mammoth that lived during the Ice Age. Aliki likes to research and draw and write about historical science. So that's science that happened a long time ago. So here we go with Wild and Woolly Mammoths by Aliki. Now, you know I'm going to check in with you to make sure you're doing your whole body listening. I can't see you just to make sure that you're doing it, but you can show the grown-ups all the things that you've been learning in kindergarten. So take a listen to this story. It's a good one. A wild and woolly beast once roamed the earth, the cold northern part of the earth. It had two great curved tusks and a long hairy trunk. Its big bones were covered with tough skin and its undercoat of soft woolly fur. Over that, its long shaggy coat of hair reached almost to the ground. It was an ancient kind of elephant called a woolly mammoth. Woolly mammoths flourished thousands of years ago. Long, long before then, when dinosaurs lived, the earth was hot and swampy, but temperatures changed, and parts of the earth got cold. In some places in the north, the snow never melted. It froze over and formed thick sheets of ice called glaciers. This was the time of the Ice Age. And this is why we had Mrs. Carlson visit and talk to us about glaciers. She taught us that Cape Cod was even made by a glacier. Those things happened during the Ice Age. Many animals died out because of the cold. Other animals didn't die out. They migrated to warmer places and survived. And remember when we visited the first grader who did their winter animal showcase, we learned about if animals adapt, how they change to be able to survive in a different climate, or how they migrate, whether they follow their food or whether they hibernate and slow down and keep themselves warm. These guys migrated to warmer places and survived. Still others remained in the cold north. Every year, vast herds roamed across the icy plains of Europe, Asia, and North America, where we live. Only animals with heavy coats of hair, like the woolly mammoth, were able to survive in the freezing cold, their warm covering to protect them. So here we have the giant elk, the woolly rhinoceros, the musk ox, the bison, the ibex, and here's our big woolly mammoth. It happened a long time ago that one of these woolly mammoths fell into a deep crack in a glacier. It broke some of its bones and it died there. Snow and ice covered its body, and the cold preserved its flesh Remember, preserve means to save it, so it saved its skin just the way it was. 39,000 years passed by, and slowly the weather got warmer again. The thick layers of ice began to melt, and the Ice Age ended. In 1900, the mammoth's body was discovered in Siberia. Siberia is part of Asia, a very cold part of Asia. Part of the woolly mammoth was poking out of the melting ice. Travelers that were roaming about noticed their dogs sniffing the thawing meat. The travelers didn't know it was a mammoth, but it was. Scientists uncovered the frozen body. Only the exposed part had thawed and gotten rotten. The part that was buried under the ice stayed fresh, preserved by the cold. Dogs ate some of the meat and liked it, even though it was thousands of years old. Later, it was said that the scientists even tasted the mammoth flesh too, and they lived to tell about it. The mammoth's last meal was also preserved in the cold, and what a meal it was! A mammoth can eat 30 pounds of plants for its food. More recently, scientists made another amazing discovery in the stomach of a mastodon, which is a relative of the mammoth. In the digestive remains, that's part of the belly where the food was stored, they found live bacteria, still saved after 11,000 years. The bacteria are the oldest living organism ever found. And you talked about organisms and atoms and molecules with Mr. Hollander Ressig before we went on our break. Scientists found more woolly mammoths frozen in ice. They found other kinds of mammoths too and studied them. Now they know a great deal about these prehistoric animals. Mammoth means giant, and they were. Mammoths were the largest land animal of their time. They lived in various parts of the world and in lots of different climates. So I'm going to have Mrs. Bean do a little talk with you while you're home and doing school about her grandfather, who was alive when they found a mastodon or a mammoth preserved in ice where he lived. So I'll have her give you a shout about that. Maybe have her post something right here in our YouTube channel. Mammoths belong to the elephant family, which includes mammoths, mastodons, and modern elephants. They're all animals with long trunks and tusks. They have hoofs and flat teeth, because you know what animals with flat teeth eat. That's right, plants. Today, only 2 species of elephants survive. Those of Africa and Asia. Those are the last 2. Ashley's gone and visited the Asian elephants when she went to Thailand. They are the last of these types of animals that first appeared more than 50 million years ago. Mammoths traveled in peaceful herds, and you're going to hear more about herds when you learn about the interdependent relationships that you would find in the mammoth steppe ecosystem. In warmer seasons, they moved from grassy plains to winding rivers, searching for food and water. They shared their habitat with other plant eaters like bison, horses, muskox, and caribou. Sometimes they were attacked by smaller, fearless carnivores like cats and wolves and bears. But there was one hunter even more dangerous than the fierce. Okay, I see what they're saying here. There was one hunter even more dangerous than the fierce saber-toothed cat, Smilodon, and it was the human hunter. But this is definitely one that the mammoth feared. They feared the saber-toothed cat. They were the fiercest animal. They're also saying that mammoth feared human hunters. Guinness is having a really hard time keeping his chew toy up on the bed with him. So I'm going to have to ask you to hold on for one more minute while I grab it. Here you go, bud. Keep it up there so I can finish reading to the kids. When you finish reading to the kids, you take a rest. All right, here we go. So these are some. So this is what happened when the Ice Age started to warm up a little bit, and the mammoths were still around. The mammoth hunters were cave dwellers. That means they lived in the caves. They needed mammoths to live. They hunted mammoths and other animals with weapons they made of stone. So their time is called the Stone Age. Not long ago, remarkable wall paintings were discovered in deep, damp caves. They were made by Stone Age artists. The paintings showed the animals people hunted at that time. They hunted mammoths and camels and bison and horses, and many of these animals are now extinct. Artifacts were found in the caves too. They were carved in ivory or in bone or in stone and tell about a life long ago. So here's a little sculpture of a horse that they found in Germany, and here's a bone knife that it is carved from bison horns, I believe, found in France. And here's a head carved out of ivory from those mammoth tusks found in France. More discoveries were made by archaeologists. You remember, those are those scientists who study ancient ruins. They uncovered the remains of a whole Stone Age village. They learned many things from the village, and others like it. They found out how mammoth hunters lived and how important the mammoth was to them. If you take a really close look at that picture, you can see all of the things that they used the mammoth for. We'll come back to that a little later, too. In winter, clans lived in caves and in rock shelters protected from the cold. In the spring, the snow began to melt, and the clans moved down to the river valleys where the mammoths would come to eat the grass and drink from the river. They picked fresh grains, roots, grasses, herbs, and berries. They collected bones of animals that the river washed down from above. They used them to build elaborate shelters covered with mud and animal skins. Then they prepared for the dangerous mammoth hunt. So this is how they would get all the people in their village some food by hunting the mammoth. Tool makers would chip knives, axes, and other tools out of stone and mammoth bone. They made razor-sharp sear points and attached them to long wooden spears. With these, the hunters would kill the mammoths, but first they had to find and trap them. Often they traveled far from their camps looking for a mammoth. Sometimes the hunters would set fires around the herds. Then they would force the frightened beasts down steep cliffs. Other hunters waited below to get the mammoths with their spears. So here's a picture. They would set a fire and make the mammoths start to run, and then they would make them run over these cliffs, and they wouldn't survive. They would fall and wouldn't be able to survive that fall off the cliff, and then they would be easily hunted by the hunters. Sometimes the mammoth hunters would dig deep pits. They would cover the pits with branches and bones and earth. Then, when the mammoth walked over the pit, the cover would collapse and the mammoth would fall in. The mammoth couldn't escape, and to make sure that they would be easily hunted, the hunters would roll heavy stones down on the trapped mammoth. They were engineers. The next one I'm going to read. And you can take a look at me while I read. Other animals were hunted for food and clothing too. but a mammoth was a prized catch. That's what they really wanted. One mammoth was big enough to feed many people for a long time in their village. The group worked as a team to skin and butcher the giant beast, and they saved almost all of its parts to use. It was hard work. They took out all the parts of the mammoth they didn't need, like the brain and the heart, and they cut and they sliced the meat into pieces so that they could share it with the villagers. They removed the tusk and saved the fat and the skin or the hide, and they would collect the bones. They brought them back to the campsite and then had a big celebration, almost like a harvest feast. That picture was a little yucky and I didn't want to share it with you. People would use the skulls, the tusks, and the bones for the foundations of their shelters. It sometimes took 95 mammoths to make just one shelter. They piled the bones around the camp for ready use. They used the mammoth's heavy hide or the skin as a door flap and cut it into strips to make cords. They twisted the long hair of the mammoth into cording for mats, and they used the woolly fur for their beds. They burned bones for fuel and boiled the nourishing fat into a rich brew to drink to keep them healthy. They used the fat for food, to drink, for medicine, and for curing hides, that's drying them out and stretching them, and for lots of other things. They made musical instruments out of the skulls, bones, and tusks. They used other parts of the insides to make cooking pots and containers. They carved the ivory tusks into jewelry and basins like bowls to wash their faces, and utensils like forks and knives. They made needles and buttons and decorations like ornaments and sculptures. They dried the fresh meat that they got from the mammoth to preserve it for winter. They also stored and preserved fresh meat in deep pits that they dug into the permafrost, the permanently frozen layer beneath the thawed, spongy soil. That would take a lot of work too. But that would keep the meat nice and cold, so it would last all winter. Season after season, herds of mammoths continue to roam the tundra, steppe, and valleys of the north. Season after season, hungry cave dwellers hunted them down. This could be one reason why those mammoths died out, but no one is really sure. So I want to go back to this picture and really take a look at all the things that they used those mammoths for. I want you to take a good look and maybe write me a list of all the things you can see in there. Part of their shelters, their tools. What are they using all of those pieces for? They didn't just hunt a mammoth for fun. They hunted it to survive. Today, elephants and many other animals are also at risk of dying out. Think about the rainforest that we just talked about. Make a connection. People are concerned and worried. Many people find ways to protect the animals, to save them from dying out or save them from extinction. Mammoths were not so lucky. Now we have only ancient remains, what's left over from a long time ago, to tell us about their existence, that they were even here on Earth. We can only imagine how it was when wild and woolly mammoths roamed the earth. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll be in touch soon.